I want to begin talking about chapters 12 through 16, the last section of Romans. The theme of chapters 12 through 16 is God's community. The theme of chapters 1 through 4 was God's righteousness, and the theme of chapters 5 through 8 was how we're made new through God's love, and the theme of chapters 9, 10, and 11 was God's faithfulness to his promises. The theme of chapters 12 through 16 is God's community. How the message, the gospel, works itself out in community. And he begins in chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I'm going to read it. It says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. This section forms a hinge between what Paul has said in the previous 11 chapters and what he's going to begin talking about in chapters 12 through 16. He begins with a therefore, which is a grammatical connection that is leading from a logical inference of what he's said before. Because of everything I've said in the previous 11 chapters, because of that, it is logical for me to urge you, in view of God's mercies, to offer your bodies. I want you to notice in this section the plural. Offer your bodies, plural, to be a living sacrifice, singular. Paul is talking to the church in Rome as a community. He's not urging individual Roman Christians in the privacy of their own homes to offer their individual body as a living sacrifice to God. He's saying that the church in Rome together, as each one of them offers their individual bodies, together comprise a single living sacrifice to God. Paul's talking about community here. And he promises that if the church in Rome does that, they will stop being conformed to the norms and the characteristics of ancient Greco-Roman society that are opposed and in opposition to God, and that they will be transformed. And as they're transformed, they will know what God wants of them. The verbs that he uses in verse 2, to not be conformed and to be transformed, in the Greek are in the passive voice. The passive voice means that this is not something the Roman Christians are going to do for themselves. It's something that is going to happen to them. They are the object of the action, not the subject of the action. Their role in chapter 1 is to offer their bodies together as a single living sacrifice. And as they do their part, God will do God's part to transform them, so that they know the will of God. For them to become the kind of community where Jewish Christian and non-Jewish Christian live in unity, despite their cultural and political and ethnic differences, that they might be able to live in humility and acceptance and to use their gifts towards building one another up instead of tearing one another down. Only God can do that work, but he only does that work in a community when they, in view of God's mercies, the individuals offer their bodies together as a single living sacrifice to become a community of transformation.